The champagne flute slipped from my fingers, crystal shattering against the marble floor of our kitchen. Through the window, I watched my husband Marcus tenderly brush a strand of hair from my best friend's face in our backyard. The same gesture he used to make with me. The same one he'd forgotten to make for months. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Camila Santos, and I'm about to tell you how my 10th wedding anniversary became the night I discovered the two people I trusted most had been living a lie. But more importantly, this is the story of how I turned their betrayal into the most satisfying revenge of my life. The party was supposed to be perfect. I'd spent 3 weeks planning every detail of our anniversary celebration, from the handwritten invitations to the string quartet playing in our garden. 42 guests, including family, friends, and colleagues from Marcus's law firm, all gathered to celebrate a decade of what everyone believed was marital bliss. I stood frozen in the kitchen, watching through the French doors as Sophia laughed at something Marcus whispered in her ear. Her hand rested on his chest just a moment too long. His smile held an intimacy I hadn't seen directed at me in years. The pieces of crystal at my feet reflected the warm glow of the party lights, each shard catching the light like tiny accusations. Sophia had been my maid of honor. We'd met during our freshman year at Northwestern University, bonding over late-night study sessions and shared dreams of conquering the corporate world. She'd held my hand through my father's cancer diagnosis, celebrated every promotion at my marketing firm, and been the first person I called when Marcus proposed on the beach in Malibu. For 15 years, she'd been my sister in every way that mattered. Marcus and I had built what everyone called the perfect life in Winnetka, a Chicago suburb where manicured lawns and pristine facades concealed whatever darkness lurked behind closed doors. He was a partner at Richardson Hayes and Associates, one of the city's most prestigious law firms. I was the creative director at Meridian Marketing, responsible for campaigns that had won 3 industry awards this year alone. We owned a restored Victorian mansion, drove matching BMWs, and hosted dinner parties that made the society pages of Chicago Magazine. From the outside, we were the golden couple. Successful, attractive, childless by choice, and financially secure enough to travel to Italy every summer. Our Instagram accounts told the story of a fairy tale marriage filled with romantic getaways, surprise date nights, and hashtags like blessed and soulmates. What our carefully curated social media presence didn't show were the months of growing distance, the conversations that never went deeper than logistics, and the way Marcus had started working later and later, claiming trial preparations that seemed to never end. I bent to pick up the larger pieces of glass, my hands shaking slightly. The caterers moved efficiently around me, pretending not to notice my distress, but I caught the concerned glance from Maria, the lead server I'd worked with on several events. She'd been in the industry long enough to recognize when a host was barely holding it together. Through the window, I watched Sophia throw her head back in laughter, her auburn hair catching the light from the paper lanterns I'd hung myself. She wore the emerald green dress I'd helped her pick out last weekend, claiming she wanted to look perfect for such an important celebration. The way Marcus looked at her with an expression of genuine delight I hadn't seen from him in months made my stomach clench with a recognition I wasn't ready to acknowledge. The party had started 3 hours earlier with what I thought was a perfect beginning. Guests had arrived punctually at 7, complimenting the ambiance I'd created with thousands of white roses, candlelit pathways, and jazz music drifting from the outdoor speakers. Marcus had been charming and attentive during the cocktail hour, his arm around my waist as we greeted friends and family, playing the role of devoted husband with practiced ease. Dr. Helena Morrison, my therapist, and one of the few people who knew about the subtle cracks beginning to show in my marriage, had pulled me aside during appetizers. She'd complimented the party, but asked with gentle concern how I was really doing. I deflected with my usual grace, mentioning how busy work had been and how excited I was to finally take the European vacation Marcus and I had been planning. What I hadn't told Dr. Morrison was that Marcus had suggested postponing the trip just last week, citing a complex merger case that required his immediate attention. When I'd expressed disappointment, he'd accused me of being selfish and not understanding the pressures of his career. The argument had lasted 2 days, ending only when I had agreed to postpone our plans indefinitely. My mother-in-law, Patricia Hawthorne, had been effusive in her praise for the party, though I detected the subtle criticism embedded in her compliments. She had commented on how thin I looked, asked when Marcus and I might finally start a family, and mentioned how nice it would be if I could attend more of the firm's social functions. Patricia had never quite approved of my career ambitions, believing that a proper wife should focus entirely on supporting her husband's success. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd spent 10 years trying to be the perfect wife according to everyone else's standards, while slowly losing myself in the process. I'd given up weekend plans to attend Marcus's work events, changed my career trajectory to accommodate his schedule, and even agreed to postpone having children until his partnership was secure. Every compromise had been presented as temporary, a sacrifice for our shared future that somehow never arrived. Sophia had been my constant support through it all, encouraging me to stand up for myself when Marcus became demanding, listening to my frustrations during our weekly lunch dates, and reminding me of my worth when his criticism became too harsh. She'd been the one to suggest couples therapy when I'd confided that Marcus and I were struggling to connect. She'd held me when I cried after particularly difficult sessions, ensuring me that all marriages went through rough patches. Now, watching her lean into my husband with casual intimacy, I wondered how long she'd been playing both sides. How many of our conversations had she reported back to him?
How many of my vulnerabilities had she shared during their private moments? The betrayal felt layered, complex, and devastating in ways I was only beginning to understand. The sound of breaking glass had drawn attention, and several guests moved toward the kitchen to check on me. I forced a bright smile and waved them away, claiming it was just a minor accident and that everything was under control. Maria appeared with a broom and dustpan, efficiently clearing the mess while I excused myself to the powder room to collect my composure. In the mirror, I studied my reflection with new eyes. At 34, I still looked young, though I could see the subtle signs of stress around my eyes that no amount of expensive concealer could completely hide. My dark hair was styled in the elegant updo Sophia had helped me create earlier, and the navy blue dress I'd chosen, because Marcus had once said it was his favorite, now felt like a costume for a role I was no longer sure I wanted to play. I thought about the woman I'd been before marriage, before the careful negotiations and constant accommodations that had become the foundation of our relationship. In college, I'd been bold, decisive, and unafraid to challenge anyone who underestimated me. I'd started my own freelance design business before graduation, sold it for a profit 2 years later, and landed my current position through sheer determination and talent. Somewhere along the way, I had allowed that fierce independence to be worn down by 1,000 small concessions. When Marcus had suggested I might be happier in a less demanding role, I'd defended my ambitions. When he'd criticized my friends as too dramatic or needy, I'd gradually seen them less often. When he'd become distant and critical, I'd assumed the fault was mine and worked harder to become the woman he seemed to want. The revelation unfolding in my backyard felt like a judgment on every choice I'd made, every piece of myself I'd modified or hidden to maintain peace in our marriage. But it also sparked something I hadn't felt in years, a clarity of purpose and a determination to reclaim control of my own narrative. I returned to the party with renewed focus, moving through the crowd with the smile I'd perfected over years of corporate networking and social obligations. I chatted with Marcus's colleagues about their latest cases, complimented the wives on their outfits, and played the gracious hostess, while carefully observing every interaction between my husband and my best friend. The signs were everywhere once I knew to look for them. The way Sophia's eyes sought Marcus across the room, the subtle touch on his shoulder when she passed behind his chair, the inside jokes that I wasn't part of, references to conversations that had happened when I wasn't present. They had developed a language of glances and gestures that spoke of intimate familiarity, and I wondered how I'd been blind to it for so long. During dinner, I sat at the head of our dining room table, Marcus at the opposite end, with Sophia positioned strategically in the middle where she could easily engage with both of us. She regaled the table with stories of our college adventures, painting herself as the loyal friend who'd supported our relationship from the beginning. The performance was masterful, and I found myself almost admiring her skill, even as I recognize the manipulation embedded in every anecdote. Marcus played his part equally well, speaking eloquently about the importance of friendship and loyalty, thanking our guest for sharing in our celebration, and raising his glass in a toast to 10 years of marriage. His words were perfectly chosen, his delivery sincere, and his performance so convincing that I almost doubted what I'd witnessed in the kitchen. But then I caught the look that passed between them during his toast, a moment of connection so intimate and charged that it left no room for interpretation. Sophia's cheeks flushed slightly, and Marcus's voice carried a subtle tremor that spoke of genuine emotion. They were sharing a private moment in a room full of people, and the audacity of it made my blood run cold. After dinner, guests moved back to the garden for dessert and dancing. The string quartet had been replaced by a DJ who played a mix of contemporary hits and classic love songs. I watched Marcus extend his hand to Sophia for what appeared to be an innocent dance between old friends. But the way they moved together spoke of practice and familiarity. Their bodies knew each other's rhythms, their steps synchronized in a way that only came from repeated intimacy. I declined several invitations to dance, claiming exhaustion from hosting, but in reality, I needed to process what I was discovering. My mind raced through months of subtle changes in Marcus's behavior, unexplained absences, and the growing emotional distance between us. Sophia's increased presence in our lives, her sudden interest in Marcus's work cases, and her encouragement for me to travel for business now took on sinister new meanings. The timeline was becoming clear. Marcus's late nights at the office had coincided with Sophia's new gym membership at the facility near his building. The weekend business trip to Detroit that had been canceled at the last minute was the same weekend Sophia had claimed to have food poisoning and couldn't attend my birthday dinner. The afternoon I'd found an earring that wasn't mine in our bedroom had been dismissed by Marcus as something that must have fallen from my jewelry box. But now I remembered that Sophia had worn similar earrings to our last dinner party. As the evening progressed, I found myself studying our guests with new perspective. How many of them suspected? Marcus's law partner, David Richardson, kept glancing between Marcus and Sophia with an expression that suggested knowledge he wasn't comfortable possessing. My cousin Elena, who had always been perceptive about relationship dynamics, avoided making eye contact with me entirely. Even my own mother seemed unusually subdued, her typical enthusiasm for family celebrations notably absent. The possibility that I was the last to know, that our friends and family had been watching this betrayal unfold while I remained oblivious, added another layer of humiliation to an already devastating discovery. I thought about the sympathetic looks I'd attributed to concern about my work stress, the conversations that had stopped when I entered rooms, and the invitations that had become less frequent over the past several months. Around 11 o'clock, guests began to leave, offering thanks for a lovely evening and congratulations on reaching the 10-year milestone. Each goodbye felt like a performance, with wishwellers praising our beautiful marriage while surely knowing the truth about its foundation. I accepted their compliments graciously, promised to share photos from the photographer, and assured everyone that Marcus and I were looking forward to many more years of happiness together. Sophia lingered after the last guest departed, helping to clear glasses and stack plates with the efficiency of someone who knew our home's layout intimately. She praised my planning skills, exclaimed over how perfect everything had been, and insisted on staying to help with cleanup, despite my polite protests. Marcus readily agreed to her assistance, and I realized this had probably been planned, another opportunity for them to spend time together under the guise of innocent helpfulness. While Marcus walked the caterers to their van and settled the final bill, Sophia and I worked in the kitchen, loading our dishwasher with the delicate glassware that couldn't be entrusted to the catering staff. The domestic scene felt surreal, two women cleaning up after a party that celebrated a marriage one of them was actively destroying. She chatted about the evening's highlights, mentioning how handsome Marcus looked in his navy suit and how proud she was of everything I'd accomplished. Her performance was flawless, delivered with the warm affection of a friend who genuinely cared about my happiness. If I hadn't witnessed that moment in the garden, I might have felt grateful for her support and companionship. Instead, I found myself studying her with clinical detachment, noting the way she moved through our kitchen with practiced familiarity, how she knew exactly where we kept the serving dishes, and the casual manner in which she handled our most expensive glassware. These weren't the actions of an occasional guest, but of someone who had spent significant time in our home when I wasn't present. When Marcus returned from seeing off the caterers, he suggested opening a bottle of champagne to toast the success of the evening. The three of us sat in our living room, surrounded by the scattered remnants of our celebration, while he poured Dom Perignon into crystal flutes that had been wedding gifts from his grandmother. The champagne was expensive, saved for special occasions, and I wondered how many bottles they'd shared during their private celebrations. Marcus proposed a toast of friendship, to loyalty, and to the people who made life worth living. The irony was so thick I could taste it, but I raised my glass with a smile and echoed their sentiments. Sophia added her own toast to enduring love and the courage to follow your heart, words that carried a double meaning only she and Marcus fully understood. As midnight approached, Sophia finally announced her intention to leave, claiming an early morning appointment and the need for beauty sleep. Marcus immediately offered to walk her to her car, citing concerns about the late hour and our quiet neighborhood. I watched from our front window as they stood beside her silver Audi, their conversation intense and intimate, his hand resting on her arm in a gesture of comfort or reassurance. The goodbye lasted several minutes, longer than any casual farewell between friends warranted. When Marcus finally returned to the house, he was unusually quiet, claiming exhaustion from the long day and the stress of entertaining. He headed directly to our bedroom while I finished turning off lights and checking locks, the mundane tasks of ending an evening that had changed everything. In our bathroom, as I removed my makeup and prepared for bed, I caught sight of my reflection again. The woman looking back at me had the same face, the same features, but something fundamental had shifted. The naive trust was gone, replaced by a sharp awareness that would make it impossible to continue living the lie our marriage had become. Marcus was already in bed when I emerged, apparently sleeping, though I suspected he was pretending to avoid conversation. I lay beside him in the darkness, listening to his carefully regulated breathing, and began planning my next moves. The old Camila would have confronted him immediately, demanding explanations and threatening consequences. But 10 years of marriage had taught me that direct confrontation with Marcus led to gaslighting, manipulation, and ultimately my own capitulation. This time would be different. This time I would gather evidence, document everything, and build an unshakable case before revealing my knowledge. I would not be dismissed, manipulated, or convinced that my perceptions were wrong. I would not allow them to continue their betrayal while maintaining their positions of trust in my life. As I stared at the ceiling of our master bedroom, surrounded by the symbols of our shared life, I began mentally cataloging what I would need to do. Phone records, credit card statements, and travel itineraries would provide a paper trail of their activities. Security cameras in our home might have captured moments of intimacy when they thought they were unobserved. Social media posts and digital communications could reveal the depth and duration of their relationship. More importantly, I needed to understand the scope of their betrayal. Was this a recent development or a long-standing affair? Had they been planning a future together while I remained oblivious? Did they laugh about my ignorance during their private moments? Had they discussed ending my marriage on their terms, leaving me devastated and unprepared?
The questions multiplied in the darkness, each one adding to my determination to uncover every detail of their deception. I would not be cast aside quietly, or allow them to control the narrative of our marriage's end. If Marcus wanted to be with Sophia, he would have to face the consequences of his choices publicly and completely. I thought about the woman I'd been before marriage, the one who had built a successful business through determination and strategic thinking. That woman wouldn't have tolerated betrayal or allowed others to dictate her worth. She would have fought back with intelligence, planning, and precision. It was time to remember who I used to be and applied those skills to the most important battle of my life. The party had been intended to celebrate 10 years of marriage, but instead, it had become the beginning of something completely different. My anniversary had marked not just the end of my marriage, but the rebirth of my authentic self. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Sleep finally came near dawn, filled with dreams of courtrooms and confrontations, of evidence presented with surgical precision, and justice served with the efficiency I'd once brought to corporate campaigns. When I woke, Marcus was already gone, claiming an early meeting that I now suspected was a breakfast date with Sophia. The house felt different in the morning light, no longer the sanctuary I'd worked so hard to create, but a crime scene where I would gather the evidence needed to reclaim my life.
The anniversary celebration was over, but my story was just beginning. The next morning began with Marcus's usual routine, though now every gesture carried new meaning. He kissed my forehead before leaving for work, the same mechanical affection he'd shown for months, but I noticed how quickly he pulled away. His phone buzzed during breakfast, and the smile that crossed his face as he read the message told me everything I needed to know about who had sent it. After his BMW disappeared down our tree-lined street, I sat in our breakfast nook with a cup of coffee and began my transformation into someone I'd never imagined becoming, a woman conducting surveillance on her own life. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd spent years in marketing, crafting narratives and managing perceptions, skills that would now serve me in uncovering the truth about my marriage. My first stop was Marcus's home office, a mahogany-paneled room filled with law books and diplomas that had always been his private sanctuary. I'd respected that boundary throughout our marriage, rarely entering except to dust or deliver urgent messages. Now I moved through the space with methodical precision, photographing everything before disturbing a single item. His computer was password protected, but I knew Marcus well enough to guess his combinations. After 3 attempts, I accessed his email using a variation of his law school graduation date. The inbox revealed the mundane correspondence of a busy attorney, but I wasn't looking for obvious evidence. Instead, I focused on patterns, gaps, and inconsistencies that might reveal hidden communication. What I discovered was more sophisticated than I'd expected. Marcus had created a separate email account using his middle name and mother's maiden name, hidden behind layers of privacy settings and automatic forwarding rules. The secondary account revealed a different side of my husband, one that wrote poetry to Sophia about stolen moments and promised futures, expressing emotions I'd forgotten he possessed. The emails dated back 8 months, beginning with professional consultations about a contract dispute Sophia was having with her interior design firm. Marcus had offered legal advice as a favor to me, helping my best friend navigate a complex situation with a difficult client. Their correspondence had been formal initially, but I could trace the evolution from professional courtesy to personal interest to intimate affection. Reading their private words felt like discovering a parallel universe where my husband was passionate, romantic, and emotionally available. He wrote to Sophia about feeling alive again, about rediscovering parts of himself he'd thought were lost forever. He described their relationship as a reawakening, a return to the man he'd been before the pressures of partnership and social expectations had buried his authentic self. The most painful messages were those where they discussed me. Marcus wrote about feeling trapped in a marriage that had become more business partnership than romance, about my focus on career advancement and social status rather than emotional connection. Sophia responded with sympathy and understanding, positioning herself as the woman who truly knew and appreciated him. They painted me as cold, ambitious, and emotionally unavailable, a wife more concerned with maintaining appearances than nurturing intimacy. The narrative they'd created justified their betrayal by casting me as the villain in my own marriage, someone who had driven Marcus to seek affection elsewhere through my own shortcomings and neglect. I printed the most damaging emails, creating a file that would serve as evidence while forcing myself to remain analytical rather than emotional. Each message was another piece of ammunition, another proof of their casual deception. But more than that, they revealed the depth of their planning and the casual cruelty with which they discussed my future. They had been making plans for Marcus to file for divorce after the partnership votes were finalized at his firm, timing the revelation to minimize damage to his professional reputation. Sophia had already begun looking at apartments downtown, places where they could start fresh without the constant reminders of his previous life. They discussed which of our mutual friends would likely side with them, strategizing about how to maintain their social connections while minimizing fallout. The emails revealed that our anniversary party had been Marcus's idea, a final performance before beginning the process of ending our marriage. He'd wanted one last celebration of what we'd built together, a grand gesture that would allow him to remember the good times before moving forward with Sophia. The romantic sentiment would have been touching if it weren't so manipulative and self-serving. After documenting the digital evidence, I moved to Marcus's filing cabinets, searching for financial records that might reveal the scope of their relationship. What I found was systematic evidence of money being redirected from our joint accounts to fund their affair. Expensive dinners at restaurants I'd never been to, hotel reservations during times when Marcus claimed to be working late, and jewelry purchases that had never appeared under our Christmas tree. The financial trail revealed a pattern of deception that went beyond emotional infidelity. Marcus had been living a double life funded by our shared resources, using money I'd earned to court another woman while telling me we needed to budget more carefully. The weekend getaway to Napa Valley that I'd suggested for our anniversary had been rejected as too expensive, yet I found receipts for a similar trip he'd taken with Sophia just 2 months earlier. My hands shook as I photographed bank statements and credit card bills, each transaction another betrayal that made their duplicity more concrete and undeniable. The woman who trusted her husband with financial decisions now saw how that trust had been exploited to fund his affair. The revelation added a layer of practical concern to my emotional devastation. If Marcus could steal from our marriage to support his relationship with Sophia, what else might he be capable of? I needed professional help, someone with the skills and resources to uncover evidence I couldn't access on my own. Through careful research and discreet inquiries, I found Rebecca Chen, a private investigator who specialized in matrimonial cases. Her office was located downtown Chicago, far from our suburban social circle, and her reputation for discretion and thoroughness made her perfect for my needs. Rebecca was younger than I'd expected, probably in her 30s, with a direct manner that put me immediately at ease. She listened to my story without judgment, taking notes while I provided details about Marcus and Sophia's behavior patterns, schedules, and likely meeting places. Her questions were precise and strategic, designed to help her develop a surveillance plan that would capture irrefutable evidence of their affair. The process of hiring a private investigator felt surreal, like something that happened to other people in movies rather than successful marketing executives in stable marriages. But Rebecca treated my situation with professional compassion, explaining her methods and preparing me for what we might discover. She warned that the evidence might be more extensive than I suspected, that affairs often revealed patterns of deception that went beyond the primary relationship.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Her fee was substantial but worthwhile, $15,000 for a comprehensive investigation that would include surveillance, financial analysis, and digital forensics. The cost would come from my personal savings account, money I'd been setting aside for our postponed European vacation. The irony of using our travel funds to document Marcus's betrayal felt fitting somehow, a redirection of resources toward discovering truth rather than maintaining illusions. Rebecca began her surveillance immediately, focusing on Marcus's daily routines and identifying opportunities for clandestine meetings. Within 3 days, she documented lunch dates at intimate restaurants, afternoon visits to Sophia's apartment, and evening encounters at a boutique hotel downtown. The photographs were professionally shot and legally admissible, showing my husband and best friend in moments of undeniable intimacy. The images were devastating in their clarity and detail. Marcus holding Sophia's hand across a restaurant table, his wedding ring clearly visible as he caressed her fingers. The two of them entering her apartment building together in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon when he'd told me he was in depositions. Their embrace in the hotel lobby, passionate and desperate, like lovers who'd been separated for weeks rather than hours. Rebecca's report included timestamps, locations, and witness statements from hotel staff who recognized Marcus and Sophia as regular guests. They'd been using the same suite once a week for 3 months, signing in under assumed names but paying with Marcus's corporate credit card. The desk clerk remembered them specifically because they'd requested late checkout and champagne service, treating their affair like a romantic getaway rather than a betrayal of two families. The surveillance revealed patterns I never would have suspected. Sophia often visited our house during my business trips, using the key we'd given her for emergencies, to spend intimate time with Marcus in our bed. Security cameras from neighboring homes captured her arriving in the evenings and leaving the next morning, playing house in the space I'd worked so hard to create. They'd been careless in ways that suggested either supreme confidence in my ignorance or a subconscious desire to be discovered. Rebecca's photographs showed them holding hands while grocery shopping at the market where I regularly bought our food, dining at restaurants frequented by our mutual friends, and attending cultural events as a couple without apparent concern for recognition. The digital forensics portion of Rebecca's investigation revealed even more damaging evidence. Marcus and Sophia had been communicating through encrypted messaging apps, sharing intimate photos and videos that left no doubt about the physical nature of their relationship. They'd also been researching divorce attorneys, property values, and custody arrangements, preparing for the dissolution of our marriage with business-like efficiency. Most shocking was the discovery that they'd been planning their affair for over a year, beginning with innocent flirtation during my business trips and evolving into a full relationship that had completely replaced my marriage in Marcus's emotional life. Their messages revealed detailed discussions about my travel schedule, my work commitments, and my psychological state, information that Sophia had gathered during our friendship and shared with Marcus to facilitate their deception. They'd analyzed my personality and predicted my responses with disturbing accuracy. Sophia had assured Marcus that I would blame myself for our marriage problems, that my perfectionist tendencies would lead me to try harder rather than question his behavior. They'd counted on my loyalty and trust to blind me to their betrayal, using my best qualities against me while they built their relationship on the foundation of my ignorance. The investigation also revealed the full scope of their social deception. Several of our mutual friends knew about the affair and had been actively covering for them, providing alibis and facilitating meetings while maintaining friendly relationships with me. The revelation that I'd been surrounded by people who knew about my humiliation while I remained oblivious added another layer of betrayal to an already devastating situation. Rebecca's final report was 300 pages of documented evidence, organized chronologically and cross-referenced for maximum impact. The investigation had revealed not just an affair, but a comprehensive campaign of deception involving financial fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to defraud. Marcus had used our joint resources and his position at the law firm to facilitate his relationship with Sophia while systematically undermining our marriage.
The legal implications were staggering. Marcus had violated his fiduciary duty as my spouse, committed adultery that would affect divorce proceedings, and potentially exposed himself to criminal charges for financial fraud. The evidence was so extensive and damaging that Rebecca recommended I consult with a criminal attorney in addition to a divorce lawyer, as Marcus's actions might constitute prosecutable offenses beyond marital misconduct. While the investigation proceeded, I maintained the facade of our normal life with Oscar-worthy performance skills. I attended Marcus's firm events, had lunch with Sophia twice a week, and participated in social gatherings where I smiled and laughed while knowing exactly what everyone else knew about my marriage. The acting required enormous emotional control, but it also gave me a sense of power and purpose I hadn't felt in years. My work performance actually improved during this period, as the skills required to maintain my deception translated into greater focus and strategic thinking in my professional role. Colleagues commented on my renewed energy and creativity, unaware that I was channeling my anger and determination into campaign strategies and client presentations. The woman who'd been slowly disappearing into her marriage was reemerging with greater clarity and strength than ever before. I began preparing for the revelations strategically, consulting with Margaret Williamson, one of Chicago's most respected divorce attorneys. Margaret had built her reputation representing high-profile clients in complex matrimonial cases, and her initial assessment of my situation was both encouraging and sobering. The evidence Rebecca had gathered would ensure a favorable outcome in divorce proceedings, but the process would still be emotionally and financially challenging. Margaret helped me understand the legal landscape and develop a strategy that would maximize my leverage while protecting my assets and reputation. We discussed timing, public relations implications, and the coordination required to serve divorce papers while maintaining the element of surprise. Her experience with similar cases provided a roadmap for navigating the complex intersection of personal betrayal and legal proceedings. The financial analysis revealed that Marcus had depleted our joint savings by nearly $40,000 to fund his affair, money that would need to be recouped through the divorce settlement. His use of our shared resources to court another woman constituted marital waste under Illinois law, providing grounds for reimbursement and potentially punitive measures. The systematic nature of his financial deception would work in my favor during asset division proceedings. More importantly, Margaret helped me understand that the strength of our evidence would likely force Marcus to negotiate rather than contest the divorce. The photographs, financial records, and digital communications created an insurmountable case that no competent attorney would want to defend in court. His reputation at the law firm and in our social circle would be devastated if the details became public, giving me significant leverage in settlement negotiations. I also began preparing psychologically for the confrontation, working with Dr. Jennifer Dandy, a leading psychologist who specializes in trauma and betrayal. She helped me process my emotional reaction to the discovery, helped me differentiate between grief and anger, and develop coping strategies for managing stress. Dr. Dandy helped me understand the likely emotional needs that Marcus and Sophia had that drove them together, and to navigate my own feelings of betrayal and loss.
Morrison to develop strategies for maintaining emotional control during what would certainly be intense and difficult conversations. She helped me recognize that my anger was justified and productive when channeled appropriately, that my desire for justice and accountability was healthy rather than vindictive. The therapy sessions focused on rebuilding my sense of self-worth and preparing for independence after 10 years of marriage. Dr. Morrison helped me see that Marcus and Sophia's betrayal reflected their character flaws rather than my inadequacies, that their narrative about my emotional unavailability was projection designed to justify their inexcusable behavior. As the investigation neared completion, I felt a sense of anticipation rather than dread about the coming confrontation. The woman who discovered the affair 3 weeks earlier had been devastated and uncertain, but the woman preparing to expose it was strategic, prepared, and empowered. I'd spent years accommodating others' needs and expectations, But this situation required me to advocate for myself with the kind of fierce determination I'd once brought to professional challenges. The final piece of evidence came from an unexpected source. Marcus's assistant at the law firm, Jennifer Walsh, contacted me through a carefully worded email expressing concern about certain irregularities in his schedule and expense reports. Without directly stating her suspicions, she provided information about his activities, the context for the affair, and suggested that Marcus's colleagues might be more located that at least some people. With all the evidence gathered and legal strategy in place, I began planning the revelation itself. This wouldn't be a private confrontation in our kitchen or an emotional scene in a restaurant. Instead, I would orchestrate a moment that matched the scale of their betrayal, a public exposure that would force them to face the consequences of their actions in front of the people they'd deceived. The opportunity presented itself when Sophia suggested hosting a dinner party at our house to celebrate Marcus's recent victory in a high-profile case. She offered to help plan and coordinate the event, positioning herself as the supportive friend while secretly celebrating another milestone in her relationship with my husband. The irony was too perfect to resist. They wanted to use our home to celebrate their success while continuing to deceive me about their affair. I agreed enthusiastically to her suggestion, proposing we invite all our closest friends and Marcus's colleagues for an elegant evening that would properly honor his achievement. Sophia was delighted by my enthusiasm and threw herself into planning with the energy of someone who had personal stakes in Marcus's professional success. She suggested menus, helped coordinate invitations, and even offered to handle the photography so we'd have memories of the special evening. The guest list included everyone who mattered in our social and professional circles: partners from Marcus's firm, my colleagues from the marketing agency, our mutual friends, and both sets of parents. The evening would serve as the perfect venue for revealing the truth about our marriage to an audience that included everyone who'd either been complicit in their deception or ignorant of it. As the date approached, I felt a sense of calm resolution rather than nervous anticipation. The shy, accommodating wife who'd spent years trying to please everyone was gone, replaced by a woman who understood her worth and refused to accept anything less than honesty and respect. The dinner party would mark not just the end of my marriage, but the beginning of my reclaimed life. Marcus noticed my improved mood and energy, commenting on how excited I seemed about his professional success and how grateful he was for my support. His words carried the unconscious cruelty of someone who'd convinced himself that his betrayal was justified by my supposed inadequacies, that I should be grateful for whatever attention and affection he chose to provide. Sophia was equally effusive in her praise for my party planning skills and my dedication to honoring Marcus's achievements. She spoke movingly about the importance of friendship and loyalty, about how lucky I was to have such a successful and devoted husband. Her performance was so convincing that I almost wondered if she'd convinced herself that she was acting in my best interest rather than systematically destroying my life. The final week before the dinner party passed quickly, filled with last-minute preparations and coordination. I confirmed catering arrangements, selected wines, and arranged flowers with the same attention to detail I'd brought to our anniversary celebration. But this time, every choice was made with the knowledge of what the evening would reveal, every decision calculated to create the perfect setting for truth and consequences. Rebecca completed her surveillance and delivered the final evidence package, a comprehensive documentation of 8 months of systematic betrayal. The photographs, financial records, and digital communications painted a complete picture of two people who'd chosen passion over loyalty, excitement over stability, and selfish gratification over honor and commitment. Margaret finalized the divorce papers and prepared the legal strategy for the aftermath of the revelation. Process servers were arranged, asset protection measures were in place, and contingency plans were developed for various possible responses. Everything was ready for the moment when Marcus and Sophia would face the consequences of their choices. The night before the dinner party, I stood in our bedroom, looking at the bed where Marcus and Sophia had celebrated their affair during my business trips.
Tomorrow, their secret would become public knowledge, and the carefully constructed facade of our perfect marriage would crumble before an audience of everyone who mattered in our lives. The woman who'd been betrayed and humiliated was ready to reclaim her power and dignity, no matter what the cost. The evening of the dinner party arrived with the crisp clarity of a Chicago autumn night. I dressed carefully in a black silk dress that conveyed both elegance and authority, choosing jewelry that caught the light when I moved. Every detail of my appearance was calculated to project confidence and control, the image of a woman who commanded respect rather than sympathy. Guests began arriving at 7, filling our home with the comfortable chatter of people who believed they were celebrating professional success among friends. Marcus moved through the crowd with his usual charm, accepting congratulations on his recent legal victory, while Sophia played the role of supportive friend, helping serve appetizers and ensuring everyone's wine glasses remained full. I watched them work the room together, noting how naturally they functioned as a team, how their movements complemented each other with practiced ease. They probably envisioned many evenings like this in their future together, hosting sophisticated gatherings in whatever home they planned to share once my marriage was officially dissolved. David Richardson, Marcus's senior partner, arrived with his wife, Eleanor, both of them effusive in their praise for the elegant atmosphere I'd created. David pulled Marcus aside for what appeared to be an intense conversation about firm business, while Eleanor complimented my entertaining skills and asked about the European vacation Marcus had mentioned we were planning.
My parents arrived fashionably late, my mother immediately gravitating toward the floral arrangements, while my father engaged Marcus in discussion about recent changes in corporate law. They'd always approved of my husband, viewing him as the stable, successful partner who'd provided me with security and status. Tonight would challenge their assumptions about his character in ways that would reshape our family dynamics permanently. Sophia's parents had declined the invitation, claiming prior commitments that now seemed suspiciously convenient. I wondered if Sophia had discouraged their attendance, knowing that the evening might become uncomfortable in ways she couldn't predict. Her absence of family support would make the coming revelation more isolated and devastating. As we moved into the dining room for the main course, I took my place at the head of the table with Marcus at the opposite end, just as we'd sat during our anniversary celebration. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. The same positioning that had revealed their affair would now serve as the setting for exposing it. Sophia sat in her usual spot between us, perfectly positioned to observe both our faces during what was about to unfold. The conversation flowed easily through the first 2 courses, covering topics from recent court cases to vacation plans to the challenges of maintaining work-life balance and demanding careers. Several guests mentioned how fortunate Marcus and I were to have such a solid marriage, praising our partnership and expressing admiration for how well we'd navigated a decade together. Marcus basked in these compliments, speaking eloquently about the importance of trust and communication in successful relationships. He raised his wine glass in a toast to loyalty and commitment, his words carrying bitter irony that only I fully appreciated. Sophia smiled warmly during his speech, her expression conveying the kind of intimate pride that should have belonged to a wife rather than a family friend. As dessert was served, I stood and tapped my crystal glass for attention. The room quieted expectantly, faces turning toward me with the comfortable anticipation of people waiting for gracious remarks from a successful hostess. Marcus smiled encouragingly, probably expecting me to praise his professional achievements and thank our guests for sharing in our celebration. Instead, I began with words that would shatter the evening's comfortable illusions. I spoke about truth and consequences, about the importance of honesty in all relationships, and about the devastating impact of betrayal on the people who trusted most completely. The room's atmosphere shifted subtly as guests realized my remarks were heading somewhere unexpected. I reached into the sideboard behind me and withdrew the folder Rebecca had prepared, containing photographs, financial records, and printed emails that documented 8 months of systematic deception.
The evidence was organized chronologically and cross-referenced for maximum impact, a comprehensive case study in marital betrayal that would leave no room for denial or rationalization. Marcus's face went pale as I began displaying the photographs, each image more damning than the last. The pictures showed him and Sophia in intimate embraces, holding hands across restaurant tables, entering hotel rooms together during hours when he'd claimed to be working late. The timestamps and locations were clearly visible, creating an irrefutable timeline of their affair. Sophia attempted to interrupt, claiming the images were somehow manipulated or taken out of context, but her protests died as I continued presenting evidence. Bank statements showed systematic financial deception, with thousands of dollars redirected from our joint accounts to fund romantic dinners, hotel stays, and jewelry purchases that had never appeared in our home. The most devastating revelation came when I read excerpts from their private emails, intimate messages that revealed not just physical betrayal, but emotional cruelty toward me. Their words exposed years of mockery and manipulation, conversations where they'd analyzed my behavior and planned their deception with calculating precision. The room listened in stunned silence as their private thoughts became public knowledge. David Richardson's expression shifted from confusion to professional concern as he recognized the legal implications of what was being revealed. His partner had not only committed adultery, but potentially violated ethical standards by using firm resources to facilitate his affair. The financial irregularities alone could trigger disciplinary action from the State Bar Association. My mother gasped audibly when I displayed photographs of Sophia entering our house during my business trips, using her emergency key to conduct her affair in my bed. The violation of our home and friendship was so profound that several guests appeared physically uncomfortable, shifting in their chairs and avoiding eye contact with either Marcus or Sophia. Eleanor Richardson, a woman known for her social grace and diplomatic skills, struggled visibly to process what she was witnessing. The elegant dinner party had become a courtroom, where evidence was being presented with prosecutorial precision, transforming a celebration into a public trial that would reshape everyone's understanding of our relationships. Marcus finally found his voice, attempting to minimize the significance of what had been revealed, and claiming that our marriage had been over in all but name for years. His defensive response only made him appear more calculating and cruel, someone who would justify betrayal by blaming the victim for inadequacies that existed primarily in his imagination. Sophia tried a different approach, tearfully claiming that love couldn't be controlled and that she'd never intended to hurt me. Her performance might have been convincing if not for the evidence of systematic planning and deception that contradicted her claims of innocent attraction that had somehow gotten out of hand. I allowed them both to speak, to offer whatever explanations and justifications they thought might salvage their reputations, before delivering the final blow. Margaret Williamson had prepared divorce papers that would be served the following morning, along with restraining orders that would prevent Marcus from accessing our joint accounts or entering our home without supervision. The legal consequences would extend far beyond divorce proceedings. Marcus faced potential disciplinary action from his law firm, possible criminal charges for financial fraud, and civil liability for the systematic misuse of marital resources. His reputation in Chicago's legal community would be permanently damaged, his partnership at the firm in jeopardy, and his future prospects severely limited. Sophia's interior design business would suffer as word spread through our social circles about her role in destroying a marriage. The high society clients who valued discretion and moral character would distance themselves from someone who'd proven capable of such calculated betrayal. Her professional and personal reputation would take years to rebuild, if recovery was even possible. The dinner party concluded with guests departing in uncomfortable silence. Their evening of celebration transformed into something that would be discussed in whispers for months to come. Some offered awkward expressions of support, while others simply gathered their belongings and left without comment, clearly eager to escape the emotional wreckage they'd witnessed. David Richardson lingered briefly to inform Marcus that they would need to discuss the evening's revelations and their potential impact on his position at the firm. The conversation was conducted in professional tones, but the subtext was clear. Marcus's behavior had created liability issues that the partnership would need to address immediately.
My parents remained until the last guest departed, my mother embracing me with tears in her eyes, while my father expressed quiet pride in my strength and dignity throughout the ordeal.
They'd watched their daughter reclaim her power and self-respect in the most challenging circumstances imaginable, and their support provided emotional validation that meant more than any legal victory. Marcus and Sophia left together that night, their secret relationship finally public, but stripped of its romantic allure by the calculated cruelty it had required. They'd wanted passion and excitement, but had achieved only shame and social exile, their grand romance reduced to a cautionary tale about the consequences of betrayal. In the weeks that followed, the divorce proceedings moved forward with surprising efficiency. Margaret's prediction proved accurate. The strength of our evidence forced Marcus to negotiate rather than contest, accepting terms that included full financial restitution and a settlement that recognized the systematic nature of his deception. The investigation had revealed even more damaging information that emerged during the legal process. Marcus had used his law firm's resources to research divorce strategies months before I discovered the affair, planning his exit from our marriage with the same methodical approach he'd brought to complex litigation. The premeditation made his betrayal more calculated and his claims of emotional unavailability more transparently self-serving. Sophia's role in gathering information about my schedule and psychological state became clear through recovered digital communications. She'd systematically reported my activities and emotional condition to Marcus, helping him time his deceptions and avoid discovery. Her friendship with me had become an intelligence-gathering operation designed to facilitate her affair with my husband. The social consequences were swift and comprehensive. Marcus's partnership at Richardson, Hayes & Associates was dissolved within 6 months, his reputation and Chicago's legal community permanently damaged by the ethical violations his affair had revealed. He eventually relocated to Milwaukee, accepting a junior position at a smaller firm where his past was less well known. Sophia's interior design business collapsed as clients canceled contracts and refused referrals. The high society network she'd cultivated for years rejected her once the details of her calculated deception became known. She eventually moved to Denver, attempting to rebuild her career in a market where her reputation hadn't preceded her. Their relationship didn't survive the transition from secret affair to public scandal. The passion that had seemed so compelling when stolen became ordinary when legitimized, their connection unable to withstand the stress of social exile and professional consequences. They separated less than a year after my divorce was finalized, their grand romance ending in mutual recrimination and bitter disappointment. I remained in our Winnetka home, having secured it in the divorce settlement along with the financial security to maintain my independence. My career flourished as I channeled the strategic thinking and determination that had served me during the investigation into professional advancement. The woman who'd been slowly disappearing into her marriage emerged stronger and more focused than ever before. The experience taught me that strength often comes disguised as devastation, that the worst betrayals can become catalysts for the most profound personal growth. I'd lost a marriage and a friendship, but had rediscovered my authentic self, the woman who refused to accept less than honesty and respect in any relationship. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I received an unexpected email from Jennifer Walsh, Marcus's former assistant. She'd left the law firm shortly after the scandal broke and was now working for a nonprofit organization focused on supporting women through difficult life transitions. Her message was brief but meaningful, a simple acknowledgement that truth and justice sometimes require courage from unexpected sources. The dinner party that was supposed to celebrate Marcus's professional success instead became the moment when I reclaimed my life and dignity. The evidence I'd gathered systematically dismantled their carefully constructed deception, forcing them to face the consequences of choices they'd made in shadows and secrecy. Justice wasn't just served that evening, it was presented with the same precision and attention to detail I'd once brought to marketing campaigns and now applied to rebuilding my authentic life. The crystal stemware shattered against our marble kitchen floor, the sound echoing through our carefully curated home like a gunshot.
Through the bay window overlooking our meticulously landscaped garden, I watched my husband of 10 years lean in close to my best friend Natasha, his fingers tracing her jawline with a tenderness I hadn't seen directed at me in what felt like decades. The champagne I'd been pouring pooled around the broken glass, mixing celebration with devastation in a way that would define the rest of my life. My name is Isabella Moreau, and at 35, I had believed myself to be living the American dream. Successful career as a senior partner at one of Boston's most prestigious architectural firms, beautiful home in Beacon Hill, and a marriage that everyone envied. But standing in my kitchen, watching my husband Julian whisper secrets to my closest friend Natasha while our anniversary guests mingled obliviously in the next room, I realized that dreams could become nightmares without warning. The revelation hit me with the force of a physical blow, stealing my breath and making my knees buckle. For months, I'd noticed subtle changes in Julian's behavior, small shifts that I'd attributed to the stress of his surgical practice and the pressure of his upcoming department head nomination at Massachusetts General Hospital. He'd been working later, traveling more frequently to medical conferences, and showing less interest in the intimate details of our shared life. When he'd started paying more attention to his appearance, upgrading his wardrobe, and spending time at the gym, I'd encouraged him, thinking he was experiencing a positive midlife renewal. Natasha had been my closest confidant through all of it, listening to my concerns about our growing distance and offering advice that now seemed calculated and manipulative. She'd suggested that all marriages go through difficult periods, that successful professionals often struggle with work-life balance, and that I should be patient while Julian navigated the pressures of his career advancement. Her support had been so consistent and reassuring that I never questioned her motives or wondered why she seemed so knowledgeable about my husband's state of mind. Now, watching them together in the intimacy of what they believed was a private moment, I understood that my marriage had been a carefully orchestrated deception for months, possibly years. The way Julian looked at Natasha conveyed a depth of emotion and connection that had been absent from our relationship for so long I'd forgotten it existed. His smile was genuine, unguarded, and filled with the kind of joy that came from being with someone who truly understood and appreciated him. The party had been my idea, a celebration of our 10th anniversary that would showcase the success and happiness we'd built together. I'd spent weeks planning every detail, from the menu prepared by Boston's most sought-after caterer to the string quartet playing softly in our living room. 53 guests had gathered to honor our marriage, including family members who'd traveled from across the country and colleagues who'd cleared their schedules to attend what everyone believed was a joyous occasion. Julian had been charming and attentive during the cocktail hour, playing the role of devoted husband with such skill that I'd almost believed our problems were in my imagination. He'd introduced me to his colleagues with pride, spoken eloquently about our shared goals and dreams, and maintained physical contact that suggested intimacy and affection. The performance had been so convincing that I'd begun to hope our recent distance was temporary, a phase that would pass once the stress of his promotion process concluded. Natasha had arrived early to help with final preparations, bringing flowers from her boutique shop and offering to manage the photographer I'd hired to document the evening.
She'd complimented my dress, a vintage Oscar de la Renta piece I'd found at an estate sale and had tailored to perfection, and assured me that the party would be memorable for all the right reasons. Her enthusiasm had seemed genuine, the excitement of a friend who wanted to help create a perfect evening for someone she cared about. The irony of her assistance now felt like salt in an open wound. She'd helped plan a celebration of the marriage she was systematically destroying, offering advice on flowers and music while conducting an affair with my husband in the shadows of our friendship. Every suggestion she'd made, every detail she'd helped coordinate, had been informed by her intimate knowledge of Julian's preferences and desires, insights gained through betrayal rather than friendship. I stood frozen in the kitchen, surrounded by the detritus of my shattered glass and broken assumptions, while the sound of laughter and conversation continued in the next room. Our guests were enjoying themselves, oblivious to the drama unfolding just yards away from their civilized gathering. The contrast between their happiness and my devastation felt surreal, like existing in two different realities simultaneously.
My hands shook as I retrieved my phone and began recording through the window, capturing undeniable evidence of their intimacy while my mind raced to process what I was witnessing. Julian's wedding ring caught the light from our outdoor fixtures as he caressed Natasha's face. The same ring I'd placed on his finger a decade earlier while promising to love, honor, and cherish him through whatever challenges life might bring. The symbolism was devastating in its clarity and cruel in its timing. Natasha had been my maid of honor at our wedding, standing beside me as I exchanged vows with the man she was now betraying me with. She'd helped choose my dress, organize my bachelorette party, and given a toast that brought tears to everyone's eyes with its eloquent expression of love and friendship. The photographs from that day showed her beaming with apparent joy for my happiness, her face radiant with what I'd believed was genuine affection for both Julian and me. The timeline of their deception began crystallizing in my mind as I watched them together. Julian's recent business trip to San Francisco had coincided with Natasha's supposed visit to her sister in California. The weekend conference in New York that had prevented him from attending my company's annual gala had been the same weekend Natasha claimed to have had food poisoning. The pattern of coordinated absences and suspicious timing stretched back months, revealing a level of planning and calculation that made the betrayal even more devastating. I thought about the intimate details I'd shared with Natasha during our weekly lunch meetings, confessions about my marriage's growing problems, and my fears about Julian's emotional distance. She'd listened with what I'd believed was sympathetic concern, offering advice and reassurance while secretly gathering intelligence about our relationship's vulnerabilities. My trust had become a weapon she'd used against me, turning my openness into an advantage for her affair with my husband. The financial implications of their deception were becoming clear as well. Julian had recently suggested we postpone the renovation of our summer house in the Cape, claiming budget concerns related to his practice's overhead expenses. Yet, I'd noticed expensive purchases on our credit card statements that he'd attributed to medical conferences and professional networking events. The pattern of unexplained expenses now took on sinister meaning, revealing how our shared resources had been redirected to fund his relationship with my best friend. Our guests began moving toward the kitchen, drawn by the sound of breaking glass and concern for their hostess. I quickly composed myself, forcing a smile and explaining that I'd simply had a minor accident while preparing the champagne service. Camila Santos, our housekeeper and the closest thing I had to a surrogate mother, appeared with cleaning supplies and a look of knowing concern that suggested she'd suspected something was wrong long before this moment. Dr. Patricia Henley, my gynecologist and one of the few people who knew about the fertility struggles Julian and I had been privately navigating, touched my arm gently and asked if I needed a moment to collect myself. Her kindness nearly broke my composure, reminding me of the compassionate support I'd received from actual friends while being systematically betrayed by those I trusted most completely. Julian appeared in the doorway, his expression showing concern that might have seemed genuine if I hadn't just witnessed his intimate moment with Natasha. He asked if I was heard, offered to help clean up the mess, and suggested we move the champagne service to the dining room to avoid any additional accidents. His solicitude felt like another layer of deception, performed for our guests while his real attention remained focused on the woman he'd left waiting in our garden. Natasha followed him into the kitchen, her face showing appropriate concern for my minor mishap, while her eyes sparkled with what I now recognized as the satisfaction of someone who believed she was successfully managing a complex deception. She offered to help serve the champagne, positioning herself as the supportive friend while secretly celebrating another successful evening of maintaining her dual relationship with both Julian and me. The remainder of the party passed in a haze of performance and observation. I moved through our home like an actress playing a role, accepting congratulations on our beautiful marriage while cataloging every glance, touch, and whispered conversation between my husband and my best friend. They were careful to maintain appropriate distance when others were watching, but their awareness of each other was constant and intimate, a connection that spoke of regular communication and shared secrets. Dr. Robert Ashworth, Julian's mentor and the current department head at Mass General, gave a toast praising our marriage as an example of how two successful professionals could build a life together without sacrificing their individual ambitions. His words stung with irony, celebrating a partnership that existed only in public perception, while the reality involved systematic betrayal and emotional manipulation. My sister, Claire, who had flown in from Seattle for the celebration, commented on how radiant I looked and how fortunate I was to have such a devoted husband and a loyal friend. Her innocent observations felt like knives, each compliment highlighting the depth of the deception surrounding me. I wondered how many other people in our lives had been fooled by Julian and Natasha's performance, believing themselves witnesses to friendship and marriage while actually observing calculated infidelity. The evening's most painful moment came when Julian stood to address our guests, speaking eloquently about the importance of trust, loyalty, and commitment in building lasting relationships. He thanked our friends and family for their support, praised my patience and understanding during the demanding periods of his career, and expressed gratitude for the love that had sustained us through a decade of marriage. The speech was beautifully delivered and emotionally resonant, earning applause and tears from our audience, while devastating me with its complete disconnection from reality. Natasha's response was equally skillful, speaking about the privilege of witnessing true love and the inspiration she drew from our partnership. She praised Julian's dedication to his medical practice and my creative vision as an architect, painting herself as the supportive friend who cherished our happiness while secretly working to destroy it. Her performance was so convincing that several guests commented afterward on her eloquence and obvious affection for both of us. As the evening concluded and guests began departing, I accepted their compliments and congratulations while mentally preparing for the investigation that would begin the next morning. The woman who had discovered her husband's betrayal during their anniversary celebration was about to become someone else entirely. A strategist determined to uncover every detail of their deception and ensure that consequences matched the scope of their betrayal. Julian and Natasha's goodbye lasted longer than appropriate for casual friends, conducted on our front steps under the guise of discussing plans for her upcoming gallery opening.
Their conversation was animated and intimate, punctuated by touches and glances that spoke of shared anticipation and private understanding. I watched from our living room window, documenting their interaction while our remaining guests finished their wine and prepared to leave. My parents were among the last to depart, my mother expressing satisfaction with the party's success, and my father praising Julian's continued professional advancement. They'd always approved of my marriage, viewing Julian as this stable, accomplished partner who would provide security and social status. Their pride in our anniversary celebration would make the coming revelations more shocking, and their support during the aftermath more crucial. After the final guest departed and the catering staff finished cleaning our kitchen, Julian suggested we open a bottle of champagne to toast the evening's success in private. The suggestion felt obscene, considering what I'd witnessed, but I agreed, needing time to process what I'd learned while maintaining the facade of normalcy that would be essential for my investigation. We sat in our living room, surrounded by the remnants of our celebration, while Julian spoke about the party's success and the gratifying response from his colleagues and friends. He seemed genuinely pleased with the evening, as if the public validation of our marriage somehow made his private betrayal less significant. His ability to compartmentalize his deception was both impressive and terrifying, revealing a capacity for duplicity I'd never suspected. When he mentioned Natasha's helpfulness and suggested we send her flowers to thank her for her assistance, I nearly laughed at the audacity of his suggestion. The man who was conducting an affair with my best friend wanted to send her grateful acknowledgement for helping plan the celebration of our marriage? The psychological complexity of their shared deception was staggering in its scope and cruel in its execution. That night, lying beside Julian in our bed while he slept peacefully, I began planning my investigation with the same methodical approach I brought to complex architectural projects. Every building required careful analysis of structural integrity, identification of potential weaknesses, and strategic planning for renovation or reconstruction. My marriage would receive the same thorough examination, with the goal of documenting its structural failures before determining whether renovation was possible or demolition necessary. The next morning began Julian's usual routine, though I now noticed details that had previously escaped my attention. His phone buzzed during breakfast with messages that brought genuine smiles to his face, communications that he claimed were from colleagues, but that clearly carried personal significance. His grooming habits had indeed changed over recent months, with expensive cologne and carefully styled hair suggesting someone who was dressing to impress a specific audience. I dived deep into Julian's online presence, websites that looked like enhancements for his professional standing, but were actually shadow sites designed to entice potential clients into legal consultations, revealed attempted indictment of myself. The evidence was clear and compelling, showing a pattern of deception that exceeded my worst expectations. The psychological complexity of their shared deception was staggering in its scope and cruel in its execution. That night, lying beside Julian in our bed while he slept peacefully, I began planning my investigation with the same methodical approach I brought to complex architectural projects. Every building required careful analysis of structural integrity, identification of potential weaknesses, and strategic planning for renovation or reconstruction. My marriage would receive the same thorough examination, with the goal of documenting its structural failures before determining whether renovation was possible or demolition necessary. The next morning began Julian's usual routine, though I now noticed details that had previously escaped my attention. His phone buzzed during breakfast with messages that brought genuine smiles to his face. Communications that he claimed were from colleagues, but that clearly carried personal significance. His grooming habits had indeed changed over recent months, with expensive cologne and carefully styled hair suggesting someone who was dressing to impress a specific audience. After Julian left for the hospital, I began my investigation in his home office, a space I'd always respected as his private, professional sanctuary. The room was exactly as he'd left it, organized with the precision that had made him successful as a cardiac surgeon, but also revealing in its careful arrangement. His computer was password protected, but I knew Julian well enough to guess his access codes after several attempts. What I discovered exceeded my worst expectations in both scope and duration. Julian had maintained separate email accounts and social media profiles that revealed a completely different version of his life, one where I barely existed except as an obstacle to his happiness. His communications with Natasha dated back nearly 2 years, beginning with innocent professional consultations about her boutique's expansion and evolving into intimate declarations of love and plans for their future together. The early emails revealed how their relationship had developed, starting with his offer to provide medical advice for her mother's cardiac condition, and progressing through increasingly personal conversations about their respective marriages and life satisfaction. Natasha had confided about her unhappy marriage to Richard, her investment banker husband, who traveled constantly and showed little interest in her creative pursuits. Julian had responded with similar complaints about our relationship, describing me as cold, ambitious, and emotionally unavailable. Their mutual commiseration had evolved into emotional intimacy, then physical attraction, and finally a full affair that had consumed their lives for over 18 months. They'd been careful to conduct their relationship away from our usual social circles, meeting at hotels in neighboring cities, and using encrypted messaging apps to coordinate their activities. The sophistication of their operational security revealed planning and forethought that made their betrayal feel even more calculated and cruel. The financial evidence was equally damaging, showing systematic redirection of our joint resources to fund their affair. Julian had created separate accounts for what he claimed were professional expenses, but the expenditures revealed romantic dinners, luxury hotel stays, and expensive gifts that had never appeared in our home.
The weekend trips I'd believed were medical conferences had actually been romantic getaways, paid for with money we'd saved for our own vacation plans. Most devastating were the emails where they discussed their future together, detailed plans for ending their respective marriages, and building a life that excluded both Richard and me entirely. They'd researched divorce attorneys, property valuations, and custody arrangements with business-like efficiency, treating the dissolution of our families as a logistical challenge rather than an emotional trauma. Their casual discussion of my anticipated emotional devastation was particularly cruel, revealing how little regard they had for the human cost of their choices. I printed the most damaging communications, creating a file that would serve as irrefutable evidence of their systematic deception. Each email was another nail in the coffin of our marriage, but also another piece of ammunition for the battle that was coming. The woman who had trusted completely was learning to think strategically, transforming her pain into power and her devastation into determination. The investigation expanded to include Julian's financial records, revealing the full scope of his duplicity. He had opened credit cards in his name only, used our joint accounts to pay minimum balances while carrying substantial debt related to his affair, and even borrowed against his retirement savings to fund expensive gifts for Natasha. The financial impact of his betrayal extended far beyond emotional damage, threatening our long-term security and revealing a pattern of deception that might constitute financial fraud. I needed professional assistance to uncover evidence beyond my reach, someone with the skills and resources to conduct surveillance and digital forensics. Through careful research and discreet inquiries, I contacted Amanda Rodriguez, a private investigator who specialized in matrimonial cases and had built a reputation for thorough, legally admissible documentation of marital misconduct. Amanda's office was located in downtown Boston, far from our suburban social circle, and her professional demeanor immediately put me at ease. She listened to my story without judgment, taking detailed notes while I provided information about Julian and Natasha's schedules, habits, and likely meeting places. Her questions were incisive and strategic, designed to help develop a surveillance plan that would capture comprehensive evidence of their affair. The cost of hiring a private investigator was substantial, $25,000 for a complete investigation, including surveillance, financial analysis, and digital forensics. The expense would come from my personal savings, money I'd accumulated through years of successful architectural projects and careful financial planning. Using my own resources to document my husband's betrayal felt appropriate somehow, an investment in justice and accountability that would determine the trajectory of my future. Amanda began her work immediately, establishing surveillance patterns and identifying opportunities for documentation. Within a week, she had captured photographs of Julian and Natasha meeting for intimate lunches, visiting expensive hotels during his supposed hospital rounds, and engaging in public displays of affection that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. The images were professionally shot and legally admissible.
The surveillance revealed patterns I never would have suspected, including regular visits to a luxury apartment downtown that Natasha had rented specifically for their relationship. They'd created a private sanctuary where they could escape their respective marriages and live as a couple, complete with shared belongings and intimate photographs that documented their alternative reality. The apartment represented a level of commitment and planning that made their affair feel more like a parallel marriage than a casual indiscretion. Amanda's digital forensics revealed even more damaging evidence, including deleted social media accounts where Julian and Natasha had posted as a couple, using assumed names but sharing photographs and experiences from their secret relationship. They'd created an elaborate online persona that allowed them to function as partners while maintaining their public facades as loyal spouse and supportive friend. The investigation also uncovered evidence of their social deception, revealing how they'd coordinated alibis and managed their public appearances to avoid suspicion. Natasha had recruited mutual friends to provide cover stories, claiming to be with people who were actually unaware of her activities.
Julian had used his professional reputation and demanding schedule to justify absences that were actually spent with his lover. Most shocking was the discovery that several people in our social circle knew about the affair but had chosen to remain silent rather than risk the social complications that would come with revealing the truth. Amanda's investigation included interviews with restaurant staff, hotel employees, and even some of our mutual acquaintances who'd observed Julian and Natasha together but had decided that maintaining social harmony was more important than protecting me from ongoing deception. The knowledge that I'd been surrounded by people who knew about my humiliation while I remained ignorant added another layer of betrayal to an already devastating situation. The investigation revealed not just an affair, but a conspiracy of silence that had allowed the deception to continue far longer than it might have otherwise. The social network I'd believed supported my marriage had actually enabled its destruction through their collective decision to prioritize comfort over truth. While the investigation proceeded, I maintained the facade of normalcy with performance skills I didn't know I possessed. I attended hospital fundraisers with Julian, had lunch with Natasha twice a week, and participated in social gatherings where I smiled and laughed while knowing exactly what everyone else knew about my situation. The acting required enormous emotional control, but it also provided a sense of power and purpose that I hadn't felt in years. My architectural practice actually benefited from the focus and determination required to maintain my deception. Colleagues commented on my renewed creativity and strategic thinking, unaware that I was applying the same skills to document my husband's betrayal that I used to design complex building projects. The woman who had been slowly disappearing into her marriage was reemerging with clarity and strength that surprised even me. I began consulting with Margaret Foster, one of Boston's most respected divorce attorneys, to understand the legal landscape and develop a strategy for the coming confrontation. Margaret had built her career representing high-profile clients in complex matrimonial cases, and her assessment of my situation was both encouraging and sobering. The evidence Amanda had gathered would ensure a favorable outcome in divorce proceedings, but the process would still be emotionally and financially challenging. Margaret helped me understand that Massachusetts law provided significant protection for victims of marital misconduct, particularly when financial resources had been systematically diverted to fund affairs. The documentation we'd assembled would support claims for both compensatory and punitive damages, potentially recovering not just the money Julian had spent on his affair, but additional compensation for the emotional distress his deception had caused. The legal strategy focused on timing and surprise, coordinating the service of divorce papers with public revelation of the affair to maximize the impact on both Julian's professional reputation and Natasha's social standing. Their careers and social positions depended on public perception of their character and integrity, making exposure particularly devastating for people who had built their success on carefully managed images. I also began working with Dr. Sarah Chen, a therapist who specialized in helping individuals navigate the complex emotions associated with marital betrayal. Dr. Chen helped me understand that my anger was not only justified, but productive when channeled appropriately, that my desire for accountability and justice represented healthy self-advocacy rather than vindictive revenge. The therapy sessions focused on rebuilding my sense of self-worth and preparing for independence after a decade of marriage. Dr. Chen helped me recognize that Julian and Natasha's betrayal reflected their character deficiencies rather than my inadequacies, that their narrative about my emotional unavailability was projection designed to justify their inexcusable behavior. As the investigation neared completion, I felt anticipation rather than dread about the coming confrontation. The woman who had discovered the affair 6 weeks earlier had been devastated and uncertain, but the woman preparing to expose it was strategic, prepared, and empowered. I'd spent years accommodating others' needs and expectations, but this situation required me to advocate for myself with the fierce determination I'd once brought to winning architectural competitions. The final piece of evidence came from an unexpected source. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, Julian's surgical resident, contacted me through a carefully worded message expressing concern about certain irregularities in his schedule and professional conduct. Without directly stating her suspicions, she provided information that corroborated Amanda's surveillance and added workplace context to his affair. Dr. Walsh had noticed Julian's improved mood over recent months, his sudden interest in appearance and personal grooming, and his tendency to take extended breaks that didn't align with his surgical schedule. The resident's observations provided medical community context for the affair and suggested that Julian's colleagues were more aware of his behavior than he realized. Her decision to contact me indicated that at least some people at the hospital disapproved of his conduct and might be willing to provide testimony about his professional impropriety if necessary. With comprehensive evidence gathered and legal strategy in place, I began planning the revelation itself. This wouldn't be a private confrontation in our home or an emotional scene in a restaurant. Instead, I would orchestrate a public exposure that matched the scale of their betrayal, forcing them to face consequences in front of the people they'd deceived and the communities that had trusted them. The opportunity presented itself when Natasha suggested hosting a celebration dinner for Julian's promotion to department head, an advancement that had been announced the previous week. She offered to coordinate the event at her gallery space, positioning herself as the supportive friend while secretly celebrating another milestone in her relationship with my husband. The irony was too perfect to resist. They wanted to use her business to celebrate his success while continuing to deceive me about their affair. I agreed enthusiastically to her suggestion, proposing we invite all our closest friends, Julian's medical colleagues, and both sets of parents for an elegant evening that would properly honor his achievement. Natasha was delighted by my enthusiasm and threw herself into planning with energy that clearly reflected her personal investment in Julian's success. The guest list included everyone who mattered in our professional and social circles: department heads from Mass General, partners from my architectural firm, our mutual friends, and family members who had supported our marriage over the years.
The evening would serve as the perfect venue for revealing the truth to an audience that included everyone who had been either complicit in their deception or ignorant of it. As the date approached, I felt calm resolution rather than nervous anticipation. The accommodating wife who had spent years trying to please everyone was gone, replaced by a woman who understood her worth and refused to accept anything less than honesty and respect. The celebration dinner would mark not just the end of my marriage, but the beginning of my reclaimed life. Julian noticed my improved mood and energy, commenting on how excited I seemed about his promotion and how grateful he was for my support during his advancement process. His words carried the unconscious cruelty of someone who had convinced himself that his betrayal was justified by my supposed inadequacies, that I should be grateful for whatever attention and affection he chose to provide. Natasha was equally effusive in her praise for my planning skills and my dedication to honoring Julian's achievements. She spoke movingly about the importance of friendship and loyalty, about how fortunate I was to have such a successful and devoted husband. Her performance was so convincing that I almost wondered if she had somehow justified her betrayal as being in my best interests, rather than recognizing it as the systematic destruction of my life. The final week before the dinner passed quickly, filled with preparations and coordination. I confirmed catering arrangements, selected wines, and arranged for professional photography with the same attention to detail I brought to major architectural projects. But this time, every choice was made with knowledge of what the evening would reveal, every decision calculated to create the perfect setting for truth and consequences. Amanda completed her surveillance and delivered the final evidence package, a comprehensive documentation that painted a complete picture of 18 months of systematic betrayal. The photographs, financial records, and digital communications revealed two people who had chosen passion over loyalty, excitement over stability, and selfish gratification over honor and commitment. Margaret finalized the divorce papers and prepared the legal strategy for the aftermath of the revelation. Process servers were arranged, asset protection measures were implemented, and contingency plans were developed for various possible responses.
Everything was ready for the moment when Julian and Natasha would face the consequences of their choices in front of everyone who mattered in their lives. The night before the dinner, I stood in our bedroom looking at the bed where Julian and Natasha had conducted part of their affair during my business trips. Tomorrow, their secret would become public knowledge, and the carefully constructed facade of our perfect marriage would crumble before an audience of family, friends, and colleagues. The woman who had been betrayed and humiliated was ready to reclaim her power and dignity, regardless of the cost. The evening of the celebration arrived with Boston's characteristic autumn clarity. Crisp air and brilliant foliage providing a perfect backdrop for what everyone believed would be a joyous professional milestone. Natasha's gallery provided an elegant setting with artistic lighting and sophisticated atmosphere that reflected her impeccable taste and attention to detail. I arrived early to help with final preparations, wearing a midnight blue dress that conveyed both elegance and authority, jewelry that caught the light strategically, and an expression of confidence that had replaced the uncertainty and self-doubt that had characterized my demeanor for months. Every aspect of my appearance was calculated to project strength and control, the image of a woman who commanded respect rather than sympathy. Guests began arriving at 7, filling the gallery with comfortable conversation and congratulations for Julian's professional advancement. He moved through the crowd with characteristic charm, accepting praise for his surgical skills and leadership potential, while Natasha played her familiar role as supportive friend, ensuring everyone felt welcome and appreciated. I watched them work together, noting how naturally they functioned as a team, how their movements complemented each other with practiced ease. They probably envisioned many evenings like this in their planned future, hosting sophisticated gatherings as an established couple rather than secret lovers stealing moments between their respective deceptions. Dr. Robert Ashworth arrived with his wife Helen, both effusive in their praise for the elegant setting and their excitement about Julian's promotion. Dr. Ashworth had been Julian's mentor throughout his career advancement, and his presence added professional gravitas to what everyone believed was a celebration of merit and achievement. My parents flew in from Chicago for the occasion, my mother immediately drawn to Natasha's floral arrangements, while my father engaged Julian in conversation about the challenges of medical administration. They had always been proud of my marriage, viewing Julian as the accomplished partner who had provided stability and social status. Tonight would reshape their understanding of his character in ways that would affect our family relationships permanently. Julian's parents had driven down from their retirement community in New Hampshire, his mother already beginning the effusive praise for my hostessing skills that had characterized her relationship with me throughout our marriage. She had always positioned herself as the proud mother-in-law, taking credit for raising the son who had married so well. The coming revelation would challenge her narrative about family values and marital success. As we gathered for dinner, I took my position at the head of the room with Julian beside me, the same arrangement we'd maintained at countless social events throughout our marriage. Natasha had positioned herself strategically nearby, able to observe both our faces while maintaining her facade as the supportive friend rather than the other woman. The conversation flowed smoothly through the first course, covering topics from recent medical breakthroughs to architectural trends to vacation plans that assumed stable marriages and unchanged relationships. Several guests mentioned how fortunate Julian and I were to have such a solid partnership, praising our mutual support and expressing admiration for how well we'd balanced demanding careers with personal happiness. Julian basked in these compliments, speaking eloquently about the importance of trust and communication in successful relationships, while his hand rested possessively on mine. The irony was so thick it seemed to have physical weight, but I maintained my composure and echoed his sentiments about loyalty and commitment. As the main course was served, I stood and requested attention from our guests. The room quieted expectantly, faces turning toward me with the comfortable anticipation of people waiting for gracious remarks from a grateful wife. Julian smiled encouragingly, probably expecting me to praise his professional achievements and thank everyone for sharing in our celebration. Instead, I began with words that would shatter the evening's comfortable assumptions. I spoke about truth and consequences, about the devastating impact of betrayal on people who trusted most completely, and about the importance of accountability in all relationships.
The room's atmosphere shifted as guests realized my remarks were heading somewhere unexpected and uncomfortable. I reached for the presentation materials Amanda had prepared, a comprehensive portfolio containing photographs, financial records, and documented communications that revealed 18 months of systematic betrayal. The photographs, financial records, and digital communications revealed two people who had chosen passion over loyalty, excitement over stability, and selfish gratification over honor and commitment. The first photographs showed Julian and Natasha in intimate embraces outside restaurants and hotels, their body language conveying unmistakable romantic involvement. The images were date-stamped and location-verified, creating a chronological record of their affair that corresponded with times when Julian had claimed to be at medical conferences or working late at the hospital.
The financial documentation revealed a systematic theft of marital resources, with tens of thousands of dollars redirected from our joint accounts to fund romantic dinners, luxury accommodations, and expensive gifts that had never appeared in our home. Bank statements and credit card records painted a picture of financial betrayal that accompanied their emotional infidelity. The most devastating evidence came from their private communications, intimate emails and text messages that revealed not just physical betrayal, but emotional cruelty toward me. Their words exposed their mockery of my trusting nature, their analysis of my behavior patterns, and their detailed planning for the dissolution of our marriage on their timeline rather than mine. Julian's face drained of color as the scope of the evidence became clear, while Natasha began a desperate attempt to minimize or explain away what was being revealed. But there was no defense against the comprehensive documentation, no way to rationalize or contextualize the systematic nature of their betrayal. Dr. Ashworth's expression shifted from confusion to professional concern as he recognized the implications for Julian's career and reputation. The medical community valued integrity and ethical behavior, and the evidence revealed character deficiencies that would affect not just Julian's personal life, but his professional standing and advancement opportunities. My parents sat in stunned silence as they processed the revelation that their daughter's marriage had been a facade maintained through calculated deception. The son-in-law they had trusted and admired was revealed as someone capable of profound dishonesty and manipulation, challenging their assumptions about character and family values. The room listened in uncomfortable silence as I continued presenting evidence, each piece building on the previous revelation to create an overwhelming case of systematic betrayal. The elegant celebration had become a courtroom where judgment was being rendered by an audience of family, friends, and colleagues. Julian finally attempted to speak, offering justifications and explanations that only made his behavior appear more calculated and cruel. His claims that our marriage had been troubled for years were contradicted by the evidence of his active deception, his systematic theft of resources, and his elaborate planning for their future together. Natasha tried a different approach, tearfully claiming that love couldn't be controlled and that she had never intended to cause harm. Her performance might have been convincing if not for the documented evidence of premeditation and the calculated nature of her deception over nearly 2 years. I allowed both of them to speak, to offer whatever explanations they thought might salvage their reputations, before delivering the final revelation. Margaret Foster had prepared divorce papers that would be served the following morning, along with legal actions that would hold both Julian and Natasha accountable for their systematic betrayal. The evening concluded with guests departing in uncomfortable silence, their celebration transformed into something that would be discussed and analyzed for months to come. Some offered awkward expressions of support, while others simply gathered their belongings and left without comment, clearly eager to escape the emotional devastation they had witnessed. The social and professional consequences began immediately. Dr. Ashworth remained after other guests departed to inform Julian that the hospital administration would need to review the evening's revelations and their potential impact on his new position. The conversation was conducted in professional tones, but the subtext was clear. His behavior had created ethical and public relations issues that the institution would need to address. My parents stayed until the venue was cleared, providing emotional support and expressing quiet pride in my strength and dignity throughout the ordeal. They had watched their daughter reclaim her power and self-respect under the most challenging circumstances imaginable, and their validation meant more than any legal victory could provide. In the weeks that followed, the divorce proceedings moved forward with surprising efficiency. Margaret's prediction proved accurate. The strength of our evidence forced Julian to negotiate rather than contest,
accepting terms that included full financial restitution and additional compensation for the systematic nature of his deception. Julian's promotion was quietly rescinded as the hospital administration conducted the review of his conduct. The ethical violations revealed by his affair, combined with his misuse of professional resources and reputation, made his continued advancement untenable. He eventually accepted a position at a smaller medical facility outside Boston, where his past was less well known and the professional consequences less severe. Natasha's gallery business suffered as clients canceled exhibitions and refused referrals once the details of her calculated deception became public knowledge. The artistic community valued authenticity and integrity, making her systematic betrayal of friendship particularly damaging to her professional reputation. She eventually relocated to Portland, attempting to rebuild her career where her past wouldn't precede her. Their relationship didn't survive the transition from secret affair to public scandal. The passion that had seemed so compelling when stolen became ordinary when legitimized, their connection unable to withstand the stress of social exile and professional consequences. They separated less than 6 months after my divorce was finalized, their grand romance ending in mutual recrimination and bitter disappointment. I remained in Boston, having secured our Beacon Hill home and the financial security to maintain my independence. My architectural practice flourished as I channeled the strategic thinking and determination that had served me during the investigation into professional advancement. The woman who had been slowly disappearing into her marriage emerged stronger, more focused, and more successful than ever before. The experience taught me that devastation often disguises opportunity, that the worst betrayals can catalyze the most profound personal growth. I had lost a marriage and a friendship, but had rediscovered my authentic self, the woman who refused to accept less than honesty and respect in any relationship. A year after the divorce was finalized, I received an unexpected letter from Dr. Walsh, the surgical resident who had provided information about Julian's workplace behavior. She had completed her residency and accepted a position at a teaching hospital in California, writing to express her admiration for my courage and to share that my actions had inspired her to speak up about other instances of professional misconduct she had witnessed. The celebration dinner that was supposed to honor Julian's promotion instead became the moment when I reclaimed my life and dignity. The evidence I had gathered systematically dismantled their carefully constructed deception, forcing them to face consequences that matched the scope of their betrayal. Justice wasn't just served that evening. It was presented with the same precision and attention to detail I had once brought to architectural projects and now applied to building my authentic life. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.